So welcome to the latest Risual Foundation video recording. So today's topic that we wanted to talk about was graduate assessment days. So we're coming up to the results season. So people are getting their GCSEs, their A-level results, graduation results. And we thought, given that Risual themselves are hosting a graduate assessment day, it'd be quite cool to cover that off as a topic. So joining us today, we've got Abi and Jack and myself. All three of us have been through various graduate assessment days, some of whom have been successful on this call, and others, like myself, have been unsuccessful on graduate assessment days. So we thought it'd be cool to kick this this conversation off today, starting with our very first question. So don't mind if Abi or Jack, you want to answer it, but how would one of you go about, or both of you go about preparing for an assessment day?
Shall I start, Jack?
I suppose ladies first.
Super. So I think when I was preparing for my assessment day, I did lots of research, so I knew exactly what to expect. So I made sure I knew what the format of the day was, what I needed to prepare for beforehand, making sure I fully understood the role, and then kind of knowing what to expect on the day. So I think it's a good opportunity to kind of re-review your CV to make sure that it's relevant to the role that you're going for. Make sure that you've practiced some presentations and some questions beforehand. So just have a little Google as to kind of the main questions that you're going to get asked, kind of strengths, weaknesses, those sorts of questions. Something that I personally do is I take some little note cards so that shows that you're prepared, you've done some preparation beforehand, but if your mind goes blank, it just gives you an opportunity just to kind of refresh throughout the day. And I think just having a think about the way that you want to come across in kind of some of the group presentations. So you've kind of been assessed all day, so it's a case of not just what you're doing kind of in front of people, but how you engage with kind of your competition throughout the day. So making sure that you've always got a smile on your face, you're just feeling prepared and confident, and just making sure that you feel calm. I think getting a good night's sleep beforehand, making sure that you kind of know how to get to the venue, you get there in enough time, just to kind of make sure that you're de-stressed before you kind of kick off your day. Don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Jack?
So yeah, I think you've pretty much covered the basis. I suppose the only thing I would add is just it's probably a bit of an obvious one. I think I've mentioned in previous sessions as well, but just know where you're going. When things do go back to being on site, don't assume it'll be at the company premises as well. I've been to ones before where large organisation, and they will tend to outsource it to another building as to not disrupt their usual business activities. So yeah, I think it's just worth checking that out and researching how you're going to get there, because whilst the assessment day might start at 9:30, don't just assume the trains are all going to be free or the buses are all going to be at the same time. I think it's trying to run through that, and if you can, I would like to do a bit of a dry run, get there maybe on the weekend just to see what it's like. Google map it just to make sure you know where you're going, or if it's far away, just try and run the route through as to what you'd think it would look like. I think it's the prep. And yeah, I just researching the company, because that'll come out later. And maybe being a bit old-fashioned, but I think dressing smartly is still a really key one. Again, it just whatever you can do to make yourself stand out, I think is really important.
Definitely. And a bit of a funny story, actually. I think making sure that you're aware of where you're parking. I think from when I did my graduate assessment day, it was in Wilmslow, so kind of took half an hour to get there, parked in a car park. You were there for 9, you were there till what I thought was 5. It ran over till 7. My car got locked in the car park. I then had to get a train home. I had to get picked up. It was a disaster. Then I'd got work the next day. I had to be there before to pick up my car. So yeah, always check on parking. Bit of a funny story.
One of several travel disasters in your time.
Oh yes, very true.
So really good tips there, guys. What kind of activities have you come across in those days? I know I've come across sort of icebreakers where they're like team building exercises and things like that. They can be quite good fun. You often tend to have 1 or 2 people who are a bit nervous on the sidelines, whereas you get others who kind of straight away throw themselves into the mix. What kind of things have you come across before?
I think, sorry, I'll go first on this one, seeing as the latter one. Yeah, I think there's a mix of that. Obviously, you'll usually, I mean, I suppose going back to the prep side, there's usually a bit of an icebreaker. So, give us a name and about yourself. Maybe just have something up your sleeve, so you're not kind of stressing when that goes around the table. I think there's usually things like company pitches. Come prepped with some content you've got in your head. You know what you want to say. They might test you on if it's product or services they do. What's this product, or can you name this, or can you name that? I suppose that'll also be brought up. Like I say, there's loads of puzzles usually, or things to test how you'd react in certain scenarios. There's lots of team games really just to test you and see how you work in different scenarios. So testing things like leadership, how do you work with others, and then I suppose quite recently they've seemed to have brought back in psychometric testing. So that's obviously testing things like maths, English. How would you combat certain scenarios is what I've come across.
Yeah, one thing that I've done a couple of times now is kind of tell us something that's true about you and something that's false. And that always kind of gets a bit of a laugh. So make sure you've got something lined up for those. I think.
That's good. And I think something else from the one that I did was they were really testing on some of the icebreaker activities, not just the fact that you kind of took control and that you were a leader, but also making sure that you're a team player as well. So I think it's kind of balancing, if you're a natural person that kind of takes over and leads in a situation, making sure that you're encouraging other people to get involved. I think that's really important. They're not just looking for somebody who can take charge. It's also about kind of how you help and encourage others. But then equally, if you're a bit more nervous and normally stand on the sideline, just making sure that you kind of put yourself forwards. You've got one opportunity to kind of show your employer that although you kind of like to be involved in a group activity, that you can also just put an idea forwards, just fake the confidence and like fake it till you make it. Just put yourself forwards to make sure that you're kind of showing a balance of skills. I think another thing that I had to do with mine, we had to do a 1-minute presentation just about us. So kind of, as James said, make sure you've got some unusual, interesting facts that you can think of, just so somebody thinks that you stand out a little bit more. And just being prepared, just doing a little bit of research, you might get something completely different to present on. But if you know a bit more about the sector that you're working on, just so you're a bit more confident. But don't be afraid to kind of just get stuck in.
Going
back to that go on, sorry, James.
Sorry, Jack. I was going to say, I think you're absolutely spot on there. I think bringing people, others into play, and showing that you've got that ability to interact with different people, put people at ease is invaluable. And I think a lot of, from what I can tell, the day is about seeing people react to pressure and reacting to adversity, and it's how do you kind of maintain a calm composure when at the end of the day you're all scrapping and fighting for a number of jobs. So that's really interesting stuff. What were you going to say, Jack?
I was saying, going back to the other presentation, Abi was talking about where you usually got to talk for about a minute. It sounds obvious to us now, having been through it, but just make sure you prep and know what you're going to say. I mean, a minute can actually be quite a long time if it's just you talking, and it can quickly go over. But I suppose, what I try to test you there around is how confident you are in public speaking, but also how good are you at keeping to time. So, if they set you a brief and say it is 1 or 2 minutes and you go on for 5, it's just demonstrating some skills there around how you handle yourself. So just wanted to say that really.
Definitely. And I've been in one before where you had a minute. If you went over, they would cut you off mid-sentence, and that just unnerves you a bit then. I think just making sure that you're prepared, but also I know that when I was doing mine, I haven't been the most public speaker. James has been my manager, so he knows it's something I've been kind of growing with, but to kind of just make sure you're delivering that confidently, doing lots of practice in front of friends, people that will critique you, so parents that will give you honest feedback. I think one of the things that I was terrible at was you want to get through it as quickly as possible. So you speak 1,000,000 miles an hour. I do speak fast anyway, most of the time, but just kind of taking a pause gives you your confidence back, gets you back on track. But just being as confident and practicing as much as you can, just so that when you're in front of a few more people and a few different faces, you've kind of, that you're prepared and you've practiced is another good tip.
Yeah, public speaking is a tricky one, because I always think if you can nail your public speaking in front of like your family and friends and things like that, then you're gonna absolutely ace it. I actually got given a tip by my predecessor that if you practice the first 10 seconds and you deliver the first 10 seconds well, the rest will take care of itself, and just don't put yourself under too much pressure, and just kind of allow yourself to kind of grow into it, and or everything will just flow naturally after then. So very good. And then Jack, you referenced the psychometric testing, which I know has kind of come back into fashion. That was something that kind of disappeared a few years ago. That's come back into fashion now. Risual themselves use that for the interview. Doesn't matter whether it's an apprenticeship, graduate, or for a more senior role. Everybody goes through that. That's quite common with organisations of all sizes. How would you handle prepping for, or yourself, Abi, prepping for doing a psychometric testing? Because hand on heart, maths just terrifies me. So that would stress me out. And I think if it was me, I'd rather than just kind of put it off, I'd just plow in and just do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult because you can never really tell what's gonna turn up on the day. I mean, they could throw all sorts of curveballs, but I think it's one thing. I think it's just trying to get the basics right. So there will be testing numerical skills, so things like percentages, maybe fractions. I think also got to look at what job you're going into. So, for example, into finance, I'm sure there'll be a lot of finance questions in there around percentages and what rates and things like that would be. I think one I went for was a procurement role, and again, they were asking me around parts per million and how much would the rate increase by faulty products, and get to work out things like that. So I think just making sure you got the basics right, and it's one of those. I think you can show your working and whatnot. They'll see where you've got to and how you've worked that out. I think that's one thing that just personally I've had that exposure to.
And there's also an opportunity for you to do like fake ones, isn't there? I can't think of the word. You can practice ones, that's the word. You can go on, do some practice ones, kind of. I think more than anything, it's the way that you kind of come up with an answer. For some of the questions, I don't think there's always, there's not always a right and wrong answer. It's kind of how you perceive the answer to be. So I think making sure that when I did one, they are quite wordy, or the ones I did were wordy. So it's just, if you've got an opportunity to do a practice one and you can see how the questions may be formed, kind of what they might be asking for, it might just help. But I think it's just about being calm. It's an opportunity to kind of get through how you'd respond to questions. And maybe you already know what some of your weaknesses are, like Jack said, and James said about maths and things. It's not my strongest area, but if you're just kind of doing some kind of quick maths beforehand, just familiarize yourself with the basics, it might just kind of help when you're faced with some of them questions as well.
Yeah, I think like for us as an organisation at Risual, we don't use that as a pass or a fail. That's kind of just gives us additional information that we haven't seen as part of somebody's CV or in preliminary discussions. And then often we use those psychometric results to kind of go through them with candidates. And where it might say they're kind of on a more extreme side of things, then we can kind of talk it and hone in on those particular things. I know I went for a promotion recently and it said I was not particularly ambitious individual, which surprised me, because I was like, well, I'm going for a promotion, so I kind of feel like that shows you I'm an ambitious person. But so just because it says something doesn't mean it's necessarily an accurate reflection. Okay, and then in terms of other things, then what kind of things would you take on the day? I know one of the things that I would take with me would be some sort of pre-canned question that I've kind of researched and would want to get an answer for. Some of those questions I'd probably ask would be kind of like, what's the training look like? How long do they as an organisation think it would take somebody to get up to speed with a role? What does success look like in the first sort of 3 to 6 months in their eyes? Have you got any thoughts?
I think onboarding is another thing that I always ask as a question, kind of what's the onboarding process? What to be expecting when you first kind of move into role. I usually ask the 30, 60, 90 day question, kind of what you would expect in those time periods, so that you've kind of got something to aim towards. And another one that I've thought of that somebody mentioned quite recently was, has somebody who's is this a new role? Has somebody kind of left the role and have moved on? Just so you can kind of see if it's a new role and they've got an expectation already, or if there's somebody that you can potentially learn from. I think it just gives an idea of kind of the maturity of the role and if this is kind of something new to the business or if this is something that's been in place for quite a while.
No, good shout. And I think probably going back to, I'm perceiving it as old fashioned, it's probably not, but yeah, I'm a good old, I think taking copies of your CV, because you never know who you're going to meet on the day. They might not have seen it. I think as well as we, for example, my first interview visual, it was, well, bring it all on a memory stick. So make sure you've got that and make sure it works and make sure it's formatted and in the right way. Again, because you might be expected to present, go through your slides or your CV. So I think just having a copy of those is really important. Like I say, having some questions to mind is good. I think also just having something where you can take notes and just show interest in the day and maybe some, again, because in the day they'll be testing you on how much you retain insight and knowledge. So going back to the start, if they're mentioning things about the company, I would tend to note those down because I would have thought that would come out later in the day around maybe some of the questions they'll ask you and trying to see what you remembered and what you retained. So again, just having something you can write notes on, I think is always it sounds simple, but I think it's always a good thing to go on with.
Yeah. And I think another little thing, like a bottle of water or a drink in your bag, so that if you're getting a little bit nervous in the interview, you can take a sip of water and you're just a little bit more in control. It gives you like a second to breathe. But just making sure that you just overall a little bit more prepared than if you've got a dry throat or just a little bit nervous. It just kind of helps you to take a moment and pause.
Yeah,
that's really good actually.
You can't, Jack.
I was going to say that's really good because actually it gives you a bit more time to think about how you might angle a response back if you say having that drink of water just set you down. That's a really good thought.
A colleague of ours, well, a previous colleague of ours, used to actually settle their nerves. They used to go to the toilet and shake their hands and shake their head in front of the mirror. So, anything can work, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I will have it for the record that I have never done that before, but maybe I will do it at some point. I think the having a drink and refreshments to hand is quite a good one, particularly if we're in COVID times or coming out of COVID. Probably some of these graduate assessment days might be online experiences moving forward, and particularly as people are potentially going to be able to maybe apply for roles in foreign countries which previously they wouldn't have been able to apply for. So it's a good shout there. Has anyone got any other suggestions for prep for an online graduate day?
I think if it is online, you've just got to be prepared that the day is going to be intense. I think probably more so than in person. You're kind of stuck in front of a screen. I think doing the kind of checking that the links work, enough time that should anything be wrong, then you can kind of reach out to somebody, knowing the right people to reach out to if your links aren't working. I'd say having a laptop to make sure your camera's working rather than it just being on your phone in case your battery dies. But also if it is online, you'll probably find out who's going to be interviewing you in each section. So maybe doing some due diligence on the people. So kind of having a nosy on LinkedIn, having a look on the website to see if you can get more information about them, just so you can kind of see possibly some characteristics. So the sorts of people that might be interviewing you, just gives you a bit of insight as to what's on the LinkedIn profile, as to maybe some of if it's more of a partner manager, they're obviously going to be potentially asking you more partner-based questions. If it's someone more salesy, that it's going to could be sales process. But if it's one of the directors, they're going to be interested in kind of all up, and you kind of know the people that you need to be impressing. So yeah, just making sure that you've got kind of things to hand, you kind of prepared for a full day. So if it is online, make sure you're having like a good breakfast beforehand. You don't want to have like your tummy rumbling halfway through the morning and you can't just sneak off. So just make sure you've got comfy seat, good camera, laptops plugged in, and you know who's going to be assessing you throughout the day.
I think just on that as well is making sure the program works. So not everyone uses the same software. People are still using Skype, WhatsApp, maybe calls like that. I mean, we use Teams. I think it's making sure that works before you wake up in the morning and go, oh, right, I need to get ready for my interview. go to make it work, and you've got to do a load of updates or downloads. I think that's, you know, you're under enough stress. It is. Don't make it more stressful. And then yeah, I think it's having that backup plan. So if the worst does happen, and hey, your laptop crashes or closes down, or the Wi-Fi cuts out, which is fairly common for me, it seems, at the moment. I think it's having a backup. So, you know, can you get the apps on your phone? Is there a dial-in option? You know, what's the next route? And find out the people to reach out to as well if that does happen. I also think, you know, Abby makes a good point that it's probably a bit more intense remotely. And, you know, you're not be able to show some of those more personal qualities, I suppose, but it does also give a bit of an advantage, if I'm honest. So, you know, if you're lucky enough and you can manage different screens, or you've got a different screen, it gives you the ability to have things open, so you're constantly refreshing yourself, or you can take notes. Again, having a copy of your CV or some of the experience or some of the examples you wanted to pull out. I think that's probably one of the main benefits of being remote.
Yeah.
And also the fact you can also probably look a bit further afield. So again, you know, where we are in the Midlands, it means at the moment, you know, jobs over in London aren't, you know, it's not daft to go and look at that because we're all remote. So yeah, I think it just opens up a bit more opportunity for everyone, really.
Yeah.
I think sorry, another one I've just thought of is that sorry.
No, to carry on.
I think it's just making sure people know you're in that setting as well. Again, when I was looking for grad roles, I was obviously still living at home, mum and dad. So, you know, big sign on the door, right?
Yeah.
You know, don't come knocking. Let's not put the, you know, let's don't suddenly think that we everywhere needs a vacuum, or, you know, I think it's again making sure there's probably no disturbances. As I say, nothing worse than, you know, someone cutting the lawn outside or whatnot. So yeah, just I suppose a bit of prep inside the house as well.
Definitely. And smiling. I think once you're on video for a long time, you've got to just be happy, be positive, and just try and get as much as your character across as you can. Think, and make sure you're not just constantly staring into the camera. Just try and be as natural as you can.
Oh, great stuff there. So without further ado, should we wrap it up there? But for those of you who are applying for graduate assessment days, taking part in them, very best of luck. And if you need any help and assistance here at the Risual Foundation, we're happy to offer any support that we can.
Super.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Thank you, James.
Bye.